A millionaire woman had a flat tire in the rain, but when two homeless girls showed up to help her change it, she was shocked to discover who they were. The black Mercedes-Benz sliced through the dark stretch of road like a sharp blade, its headlights battling against the curtain of rain pouring from the sky. Claire adjusted the rearview mirror, catching the reflection of her tired green eyes, still weighed down by the remains of mascara from the charity gala. Her fingers, nails perfectly manicured in dark red, drummed against the leather steering wheel in time with the jagged rhythm of the thunder. The Valentino gown, which only hours ago sparkled under the chandeliers of the ballroom, now felt like an uncomfortable suit of armor. Another flash of lightning tore through the sky, briefly illuminating the luxurious car interior and the tense face of its solitary driver. Her cell phone vibrated on the console, probably yet another message from someone at the event, praising her speech about corporate social responsibility. Claire ignored it. The words she had spoken on stage now sounded hollow in her mind, echoing like distant thunder. The bang came without warning. The Mercedes danced dangerously on the wet road, skidding like a wounded animal until it stopped on the muddy shoulder. Claire gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. "No, no, no," she muttered, switching on the hazard lights and reaching for her phone. No signal. The top-of-the-line device was as useful as a paperweight at that moment. The rain pelted the windshield with renewed force as Claire opened the glove compartment, searching for the flashlight that should be there. Her fingers found only papers, a forgotten lipstick, and the irony of her situation, a successful executive, utterly stranded on a deserted road. A movement in the darkness made her body freeze. Through the foggy glass, two small silhouettes emerged from the curtain of rain like specters from a Gothic tale. Claire held her breath, her body as taut as a violin string about to snap. The silhouettes materialized into two girls. The taller one couldn't have been more than 7, dark hair plastered to her face by the rain, with large, determined eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. The smaller one partially hid behind her sister, but her curious eyes sparkled with their own light. "Do you need help, Mom?" The older girl's voice cut through the closed window, clear as a bell in the downpour. Claire hesitated, her fingers instinctively clutching her Chanel purse. What kind of children wandered alone on a deserted road during a storm? Her instinct screamed danger, but something in that girl's gaze made her lower the window a few inches. "You shouldn't be out here. Where are your parents?" The smaller girl, no older than 5, smiled, revealing a front tooth gap. "Sophie knows how to fix cars. She learned from Mr. Miller." "Anne!" The older one, Sophie, shot her sister a warning look before turning back to Claire. "Can I take a look at the tire? It's too dark for you to do that on your own." The absurdity of the situation struck Claire like another clap of thunder. There she was, a successful executive, considering accepting help from two soaked children who seemed straight out of a grim fairy tale. Lightning illuminated Sophie's face, and Claire saw something there, a forced maturity, knowledge beyond her years. Her own eyes in the rearview mirror looked younger by comparison. "All right," Claire heard herself say, the words escaping before she could contain them. "But you'll both get in the car afterward. I can't leave you out in this rain." Sophie nodded with a seriousness that seemed out of place on her young face. Anne clapped her hands, spraying water around. The two girls moved to the side of the car with a coordination that hinted at practice. Claire watched through the side mirror as Sophie knelt in the mud, her small hands moving with surprising competence around the damaged tire. Anne held a small flashlight, the beam occasionally dancing when thunder spooked her. Questions piled up in Claire's mind like the dark clouds above. Who were these children? How did they know so much about cars? Why were they alone? And why, despite the absurdity of it all, did she feel a strange sense that something important was happening? The metallic sound of the jack cut through the rain, and Claire realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. As she watched those two tiny figures working in harmony under the storm, a certainty grew in her chest. This night would change her life forever. Sophie stood up, mud staining her already soaked dress. Her eyes met Claire's through the glass, and for a moment, they weren't an executive and a street child. They were two souls connected by something bigger than either of them could yet understand. The rain kept falling, but now it felt gentler, as if nature itself were curious to see what would happen next. Destiny, Claire realized, sometimes arrives disguised as coincidence, and that night it had arrived in the form of two little makeshift mechanics. The creaking metal of the jack mixed with the relentless drumming of the rain. Sophie handled the tools with disconcerting skill, her small hands moving with surgical precision while Anne kept the flashlight beam steady despite the occasional jolts caused by thunder. "The lug wrench is really tight," Sophie murmured, her brows knitted in concentration. "Ma'am, could you help me here?" Claire got out of the car, her Christian Louboutin heel instantly sinking into the mud. The contrast was surreal. She could peek in her drenched evening gown, kneeling beside a child who seemed more competent than many adults she knew. "Like this," Sophie guided Claire's hands on the wrench. "Now, push down with your weight. Mr. Miller always said you have to use your body mass." "Mr. Miller?" Claire asked, seizing the moment as they struggled together against the stubborn lug nut. "Is he a mechanic?" "He was," Anne answered, before Sophie could stop her. "He used to let us stay in the shop when it rained, but now—" "Anne," Sophie interrupted, a warning in her tone that went beyond her years. "Shine the light here, please." The nut finally gave way, and Claire watched in fascination as Sophie coordinated the tire change with the efficiency of a veteran. Her simple, worn clothes told a different story from the skill she displayed. "Do you live around here?" Claire tried again, her heart aching at the sight of Anne shivering in the cold. "Not exactly," Sophie replied after a calculated pause. "We move around a lot." "Ever since Mommy went looking for that special doctor," Anne added in a low voice, as if sharing a secret. Claire noticed how Sophie's shoulders tensed at her sister's words. "A special doctor?" "Mommy needed help," Sophie explained vaguely, tightening the last lug nut. "She promised she'd be back soon, but—" "It's been 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days, Anne said, her small voice carrying immense weight. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain. Claire looked at the two girls, Sophie with her forced maturity, and Anne still clinging to an innocence that refused to die. Her Cartier watch flashed under a lightning bolt, reminding her of the gulf between their worlds. "Let me pay you for the service," Claire said gently, reaching for her wallet. "You've helped me so much." "We don't need—" Sophie began, but her eyes betrayed an internal conflict at the sight of the bills. "Please," Claire insisted, "it's the least I can do." Anne looked at the bills, then at her sister, a silent conversation passing between them. Sophie hesitated, her pride battling a need Claire could only guess at. "It's very late for you to be on the street," Claire continued, noticing how the girl's clothes dripped. "I can take you to a shelter or—" "No!" The panic in Sophie's voice was palpable. "Shelter's separate, sisters. We promised Mommy we'd stay together." Something broke inside Claire at the sight of the fear in the girl's eyes. "Then let me take you somewhere safe, at least for tonight. You get to choose where." Sophie studied Claire for a long moment, her eyes carrying an ancient wisdom in such a young face. Anne clutched her sister's hand, visibly trembling now. "Just to the next town," Sophie finally conceded, "and we choose where we get off." Claire nodded, opening the Mercedes back door. The girls climbed in hesitantly, their small bodies leaving puddles on the Italian leather seats. Claire turned the heater on full blast, watching in the mirror as Anne snuggled against Sophie, her eyes already heavy with sleep. The engine purred softly as they got back on the road. Claire adjusted the mirror, catching Sophie's reflection, still alert, still protective, her eyes mapping every movement, every turn along the way. The silence in the car was dense, laden with unasked questions and untold stories. Claire felt the weight of each mile, each decision that had led her there. In her corporate world, everything had a logical explanation, a clear action plan. But this was different. A distant flash of lightning briefly illuminated the car's interior, revealing Claire's reflection on the windshield. a successful executive with two homeless children in the back seat of her luxury car. The image seemed torn from a novel, the kind that changes the characters' lives forever. And as the rain continued to fall outside, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was being swept into something bigger than herself, a story that had begun long before that rainy night and that, somehow, was destined to change not just her life, but everyone involved. The road ahead wound through the darkness like a black river, guiding them to a destination none of them could yet imagine. In the back seat, Anne finally fell asleep, but Sophie kept her silent vigil, her eyes occasionally meeting Claire's in the mirror. Two different worlds joined by a stormy night and a flat tire. And so they continued, three lost souls in a stormy night, each carrying their own secrets, their own pains, unaware that fate had chosen that exact moment to begin weaving its web of redemption. The Mercedes slid quietly down a lane lined with century-old oak trees, its headlights briefly illuminating the raindrops still clinging to the leaves like tiny diamonds. Claire felt the weight of the girl's stares through the rearview mirror, Sophie with her usual caution, Anne wide-eyed with wonder. "You live here?" Anne's voice broke the silence, echoing the disbelief Claire had seen countless times in visitors' eyes. The Victorian manor loomed out of the darkness like a ghost ship, its tall windows and ornate towers silhouetted against the still stormy sky. The garden lights highlighted the stone facade, creating dramatic shadows on the carved pillars. "It's too big for just one person," Claire admitted, parking under the portico. "But tonight, it'll have a bit more life." Sophie squeezed Anne's hand, her body tense like a violin string. "We don't want to be a bother. We can—" "Not tonight," Claire interrupted gently. "It's too late to find another place, and you need to dry off and rest." The entrance hall, with its marble floor and sweeping staircase, looked even more imposing through the girl's eyes. Their wet footsteps echoed in the empty space, leaving small puddles that reflected the sparkle of the crystal chandelier. "Martha?" Claire called, her voice reverberating off the walls. "Martha must have gone home," she explained, more to herself than to the girls. "She's my housekeeper, but she doesn't live here." Claire led them upstairs, passing corridors decorated with paintings in gilded frames and antique tapestries. Anne occasionally touched the walls, as if to confirm they were real, while Sophie kept her eyes on each exit, mapping possible escape routes. "This will be your room," Claire announced, opening a carved oak door. The guest room, rarely used, was decorated in shades of blue and gold, featuring a king-size bed that seemed far too large for the two small figures dripping water onto the Persian rug. "I'll get you some dry clothes and prepare something for you to eat," Claire said, noticing how the girls hesitated in the doorway, as though afraid to soil the expensive carpet. "The bathroom is right over there. It has clean towels and everything you need." As she rummaged through her closet looking for anything that might fit the girls, Claire was struck by the unreality of the situation. A few hours ago, she'd been at a charity gala, discussing donations with people who'd never known real need. Now she was housing two homeless children in her Victorian manor. She returned with some old t-shirts that would serve as nightgowns, only to find the girls still standing where she had left them. "You can go in," she encouraged. "This room is yours tonight." In the kitchen, as she prepared hot chocolate and sandwiches, Claire caught her reflection in the window. Who was this woman now acting on impulse, breaking all the self-preservation rules she'd built over the years? When she went back to the room, she found the girls already bathed and dressed in the oversized t-shirts. Anne sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging without touching the floor, while Sophie stood like a sentinel. "I brought something for you to eat," Claire said, placing the tray on a side table. "You must be hungry." Anne devoured the sandwich with childlike enthusiasm, but Sophie hesitated, her eyes studying Claire with unsettling intensity. "Why are you doing this?" The question took Claire by surprise. "Why back indeed?" "Because it's the right thing to do," she answered, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. Later, after the girls finally fell asleep, Anne sprawled like a starfish. Sophie curled protectively by her side. Claire wandered the silent corridors of her mansion. The sound of her footsteps echoed differently now, as if the house, too, sensed the change in the air. She stopped by the window of her study, watching the rain that was finally beginning to let up. Her reflection in the glass looked like a younger version of herself, as though the last few hours had stripped away layers of carefully applied social polish. The manor, once a symbol of her success, now painfully highlighted her loneliness. How many nights had she spent alone in these corridors, her steps echoing in rooms too empty for just one person? How long had she hidden behind meetings, charity events, and business dinners? A soft noise made her turn. Sophie stood in the doorway of the study, her eyes shining in the dim light like a nocturnal little creature. "Can't sleep?" Claire asked gently. "I never sleep well in new places," Sophie replied, her voice carrying a maturity that broke Claire's heart. For a moment, they stood there in silence, two sleepless souls connected by circumstances neither fully understood. The rain outside had turned into a gentle drizzle, but Claire felt a storm brewing in her chest, a storm of unanswered questions, unmade decisions, and inevitable changes looming. "Go back to bed," she finally said. "Tomorrow is another day." Sophie nodded and disappeared silently into the hallway, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts. The manor seemed to whisper around her, echoing with unfulfilled possibilities and untraveled paths. Claire walked to her own suite, her steps heavy with reflection. Passing the girls' room, she paused briefly, listening to the soft breathing of the two sleeping sisters. For an instant, she imagined what it would be like to hear those sounds every night, to have a purpose beyond spreadsheets and corporate reports. In her bedroom, Claire sat on the edge of the bed holding a framed photo of her parents. How long had it been since she felt the warmth of a family embrace, since she'd made a decision based purely on compassion rather than strategic calculations? The rain had stopped completely now, but the ensuing silence was almost deafening. Claire knew that something fundamental had changed that night. The gears of fate, so long still, had begun to turn again. She lay down, but sleep didn't come. Her mind drifted between past memories and future possibilities. Who were these girls, really? What had happened to their mother? And why did Claire feel, deep in her soul, that her life was about to be completely redefined? The first hints of dawn were coloring the sky when Claire finally drifted off, exhausted. Yet even in her dreams, she found herself walking through endless corridors, chasing the sound of childlike laughter that always seemed just around the next corner. The mansion, silent witness to this night of transformations, seemed to breathe with a new life. Shadows in the darkest corners withdrew, as though the children's presence had brought light to places long forgotten. And as the new day emerged, promising to reveal the first contours of a story yet to be written, one thing was certain: Claire Thompson's life, like her solitary manor, would never be the same again. The smell of burnt toast was the first sign that this morning would be different. Claire opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the sound of whispers and giggles coming from downstairs, sounds long forgotten in this too quiet house. Wearing her silk robe, she followed the noises to the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway, observing the surreal scene. Sophie, standing on a stool, trying to operate the modern coffee machine, while Anne, still dressed in the oversized t-shirt, arranged partially burnt toast on fine china plates. "I'm sorry," Sophie said as soon as she noticed Claire, quickly stepping down from the stool. "We wanted to make breakfast, but I burned the toast," Anne finished, her lower lip quivering slightly. Claire felt a smile form involuntarily on her lips. "It's all right. Actually, I like my toast well done." They sat at the kitchen table, a less formal piece of furniture than the main dining table. Claire watched the girls eat, noticing how Sophie cut Anne's toast into small pieces, how she checked the temperature of the hot chocolate before letting her sister drink it. "Did you sleep well?" Claire asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "The bed is really soft," Anne answered between bites. "It feels like sleeping on clouds." "We're not used to so much comfort," Sophie added, her eyes downcast at her cup. "Ever since we left, since we started looking for Mommy." Claire set her coffee cup down. "Exactly how long has it been?" 3 months, 2 weeks, and 5 days. Anne replied promptly, the same precision as before. And before that, where did you live? Sophie visibly tensed. In a place that wasn't good for us, but Mommy is going to come back and take us somewhere better. She promised, Anne whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Claire felt her heart clench. Do you know where she went? Maybe I can help look for her. She needed help? Sophie chose her words carefully. She said she'd come back as soon as she was better. And you don't have other relatives? Anyone who could... No. Sophie's response was too quick, too firm. Anne dropped a piece of toast, her eyes suddenly brimming with tears. Claire drew back, realizing she'd touched a nerve. She studied the girls more carefully. Worn but clean clothes, polite manners, unusual knowledge about car repairs. There was a hidden story there, buried under layers of secrets and fear. What's your mum's name? Claire tried again, her voice soft. Sophie hesitated, trading a quick glance with Anne. Mommy? She answered simply. She's just... Mommy. Claire nodded, recognizing the evasion. She got up to check her phone, which already showed multiple unread work messages. Reality was starting to weigh on her, but the idea of simply handing these girls over to the authorities made her stomach turn. I have to go to work, she announced, noticing the flicker of panic in Sophie's eyes. But you can stay here. Martha, my housekeeper, will be here soon. She's trustworthy. We really should leave, Sophie said, standing. We've already taken too much of your kindness. Please. Claire was surprised by the urgency in her own voice. Stay, at least until I come back. We can figure something out together. The sisters exchanged glances, that now familiar silent conversation. It was Anne who decided, clinging to Sophie's hand. Can we just stay for today? I'm tired of running. Sophie relented, her shoulders sagging slightly. Just today, then? While getting ready for work, Claire made a few discreet phone calls. She needed information about missing children in recent months, about a possible mother seeking treatment, but something told her the girl's story wouldn't be found in official records. At the office, between meetings and calls, Claire couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept drifting to the two young house guests in her mansion. Who were they really? What had led them to that road the night before? And why did Claire feel such a strong connection so quickly? By the end of the day, exhausted more by the unanswered questions than by work, Claire returned home with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. As she entered, she was greeted by an unusual silence. Sophie, Anne, she called, a hint of concern in her voice. We're here, ma'am. Martha's voice came from the library. Claire found a scene that melted her heart. Anne dozed on the sofa, clutching a worn teddy bear that Claire recognized from her own childhood. Sophie sat on the floor, surrounded by open books, atlases, encyclopedias, history volumes. They spent the day here, Martha explained quietly. The older one seems to be looking for something in the maps. Claire thanked Martha and approached Sophie. Find anything interesting? Sophie looked up, a flicker of hope mixed with frustration in her eyes. Mommy talked about a valley. I think, but there are so many valleys in these maps. A valley? Claire felt an inexplicable shiver. What kind of valley? A place of hope, Sophie murmured, almost to herself. She said she was going to a place where people like her got better. Claire felt the world tilt for a moment. Hope Valley, that name echoed in her mind, conjuring memories of a past she had tried to bury. The clinic her company had acquired years ago in a controversial merger. Sophie, Claire called softly, her heart pounding. What's your mother's name? The girl hesitated, her eyes meeting Claire's with a blend of fear and challenge. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, she replied, Pauline. Pauline Bennett. The name struck Claire like lightning. Pauline Bennett, the young psychologist who had vehemently opposed the merger, who had delivered a passionate speech about how the clinic was more than a business, it was a refuge for those in need. Claire stumbled to a nearby chair, her mind spinning. How had she not realized sooner? The signs were all there, the girls' good manners, Sophie's basic psychology knowledge, even the way they handled stressful situations. Fate, Claire realized, had a very peculiar sense of irony. Years ago, her corporate decisions had affected Pauline Bennett's life in ways she'd never fully considered. Now, the universe had placed Pauline's daughters on her doorstep on a stormy night. Looking at Sophie, so small among those giant books, and at Anne sleeping peacefully with the old teddy bear, Claire knew she couldn't just hand them over to the authorities. These children were, in some way, her responsibility now, a chance at redemption she hadn't even known she needed. "We'll find her," Claire finally said, her voice filled with a resolve that surprised even herself. "We'll find your mother, Sophie, I promise." Sophie gazed at her for a long time, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. Then, slowly, a small smile formed on her lips, the first genuine smile Claire had seen. Night fell over the mansion, but for the first time in a long while, Claire didn't feel alone. As she watched the girls sleep, she knew her life had been irrevocably changed. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with questions and possibly dangers. But looking at those two little figures, Claire felt something she hadn't experienced in years: purpose. And with that purpose came a certainty. The fate that had intertwined their lives wasn't a coincidence, but the start of a journey that might heal old wounds and create new possibilities for everyone involved. Dawn had barely broken through the windows of the manor when Claire was already in her study, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice, usually steady in corporate negotiations, now carried almost palpable urgency. "Yes, a woman named Pauline Bennett. 2 daughters, missing for about 3 months," she repeated for what felt like the 100th time, her fingers drumming impatiently on the mahogany desk. No information." "I see. Thank you." Claire hung up, frustration evident on her face. She had spent the entire morning making calls to hospitals, clinics, even some old police contacts. Nothing. It was as if Pauline Bennett had simply vanished. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Sophie stood at the threshold, her curious eyes scanning the bookshelves and paintings on the walls. "Good morning," Claire smiled, trying to mask her frustration. "Did you sleep well?" Sophie nodded, stepping cautiously closer to the desk. "Were you looking for Mommy?" Claire hesitated and unsure how much to reveal. "I'm trying, yes, but it's not easy to find any information." A flash of pain crossed the girl's eyes. "Mommy always said sometimes people need to disappear to heal." "Heal?" Claire leaned forward, intrigued. "Sophie, was your mother ill?" Sophie bit her lip, clearly debating how much to share. She got really sad. Sometimes she talked to herself, or wouldn't leave her bed for days." Claire felt her heart twist. Depression? Maybe something more serious. Did she seek help before leaving? "She went to a big hospital once," Sophie said, her eyes distant. "Stayed there for a few days, but she said it wasn't the right place and that she needed to find a valley." "Hope Valley," Claire finished softly, realization hitting her like a thunderbolt. Sophie stared at her, surprised. "You know it?" Claire paused. How could she explain corporate mergers and the closure of mental health clinics to a child? "I heard of it," she answered vaguely. "I'll look into it more. Okay?" Sophie nodded, a small smile of gratitude on her lips. When she left the study, Claire collapsed into her chair, her mind spinning. The Hope Valley Clinic had been shut down years ago after her company's acquisition. Where could Pauline have gone in search of that kind of treatment? The following days brought a strange routine to the manor. Claire divided her time between work and her secret investigations, while the girls slowly adapted to their new environment. Anne had taken a liking to an old teddy bear found in the attic, Theodore Harn, as Claire recalled from her childhood. The little one carried it everywhere, whispering stories and secrets into its worn ear. "Mommy will like Theodore when she comes back," Anne remarked one night, and while Claire tucked her in, "She always wanted us to have nice toys like this." Claire felt a lump in her throat. "I'm sure she will, honey." Sophie, on the other hand, spent hours in the library, devouring books on geography, history, and, Claire noted with mixed admiration and concern, basic psychology. One afternoon, Claire found the older girl studying a detailed map of the state. "What are you looking for?" "Valleys," Sophie replied, not taking her eyes off the paper. "Mommy said the place she went to was in a beautiful valley with lots of trees." Claire sat beside her, examining the lines on the map. How many valleys existed in that region? How many could hide a clandestine clinic or a retreat for people with mental health issues? "Sophie," Claire began carefully, "you understand that it might be hard to find your mom, right?" The girl looked up, a fierce determination shining in her eyes. "We'll find her. She promised she'd come back, and Mommy always keeps her promises." Claire felt her heart break a little. Sophie's unwavering confidence was both touching and painful. How many disappointments had this child already faced? How many more would she face? At night, alone in her room, Claire found herself reflecting on the situation. There was something about these girls, their resilience, their loyalty to each other, that touched Claire deeply. She found herself increasingly involved, more determined to help. But a persistent voice in her mind reminded her, "This is temporary. You'll find their mother, and everything will go back to normal. Your life will return to what it was." Yet, staring at the ceiling of her luxurious suite, Claire was no longer sure she wanted things to return to normal. The manor, once so silent and cold, now hummed with new energy. Anne's laughter echoing through the corridors, Sophie's sharp questions at dinner. It all brought a life Claire hadn't known was missing. The next morning, coming down for breakfast, Claire stumbled on a scene that made her pause in the kitchen doorway. Sophie, with intense concentration, was attempting to make pancakes while Anne helped clumsily, flour dusting her face and clothes. "Mommy always made pancakes on Sundays," Sophie explained when she noticed Claire. "We thought, well, it would be nice to make them today." Claire felt a warm feeling expand in her chest. "Can I help?" The three of them spent the next hour in the kitchen, laughing at crooked pancakes and cleaning up batter spills. For a moment, Claire almost believed they were a real family, with no complicated past or uncertain future. Later, while the girls played in the garden, Claire watched them from her study window. Sophie chased Anne, both laughing in a way that Claire suspected they hadn't in a long time. Then she noticed it. Sophie's gaze. Even in the middle of play, there was something in her eyes, a constant vigilance, a forced maturity no child should have. It was the look of someone who had grown up too fast, who had faced more than she should. Claire felt a surge of protectiveness. She wanted to shield these girls from further pain, further disappointment. But she also knew she couldn't make promises she might not keep. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Claire opened the window, letting in the gentle breeze. "Girls, bath time," she called, surprised by how natural it felt to say. Watching them run toward the house, giggling and lightly pushing each other, Claire was hit by the realization. No matter how long it took to find Pauline, no matter what happened next, these girls had already changed her life forever. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges Claire couldn't yet imagine, but looking at Sophie and Anne, seeing the trust and hope in their eyes, she knew she would do whatever it took to protect and help them. The search for Pauline Bennett was only beginning, and with it, a journey that promised to transform not just the girls' lives, but Claire Thompson's as well. Fate had intertwined their paths in an unexpected way, and all that was left was to forge ahead, one step at a time, toward an uncertain future full of possibilities. The aroma of freshly made pancakes filled the Thompson Manor's kitchen on a calm Sunday morning. Claire, still in her silk robe, watched with a mix of admiration and apprehension as Sophie deftly flipped a pancake in the air. "Careful not to burn yourself," Claire warned gently, surprised by the maternal tone in her own voice. Anne, seated at the table with Theodore clutched tightly, swung her legs excitedly. "Sophie makes the best pancakes in the world, almost as good as Mommy's. A momentary silence fell at the mention of Pauline. Claire noticed Sophie's shoulders tense slightly, though her face remained focused on her task. "Girls," Claire began hesitantly, "do either of you have any food allergies I should know about? Or do you need a doctor's checkup?" Sophie turned, a surprised look on her young face. "Not that I know of. Mommy always took care of that stuff." "I got a shot once," Anne said proudly. "It hurt, but I got a lollipop after." Claire felt a pang in her heart. These questions, so basic for any parent or guardian, were new to her. What else should she be asking? What other care might these girls need? After breakfast, while the girls explored the garden under Martha's watchful eye, Claire withdrew to her study. The search for Pauline Bennett was still fruitless, and frustration was mounting. Opening a drawer for some documents, a yellowed file caught her attention. "Project Hope Valley, Acquisition and Restructuring," read the formal black letters on the cover. Claire felt a chill as she opened the folder. Images of a modest clinic surrounded by lush nature filled the first pages. Financial reports, merger proposals, and finally, a memo that churned her stomach. "It is recommended to dissolve the current structure of Hope Valley, relocating patients to larger, more efficient facilities. The property will be converted into a corporate conference center." Memories flooded her mind. Heated meetings, employee protests, the passionate face of a young psychologist arguing against closure. How had she not made the connection before? A soft knock on the door pulled her back. Jenkins, the butler who had served the Thompson family for decades, entered with a concerned expression. "Ms. Claire, forgive my intrusion, but I feel I must voice my concern." Claire closed the folder quickly. "About what, Jenkins?" "The children, ma'am. Taking in unaccompanied minors. It can be legally complicated and potentially dangerous." Claire sighed, massaging her temples. "I know, Jenkins, but I can't just abandon them. I understand your generous heart, Mum. I recall when you were younger and wanted to fix the world as well." Jenkins paused, carefully choosing his words. "But sometimes, the best course of action is to let the proper authorities handle such situations." Claire looked out the window, watching Sophie push Anne on a makeshift swing. Anne's laughter echoed through the garden, a sound Claire realized she was starting to adore. "I've made a decision, Jenkins," she finally said. "I'm hiring a private investigator. David Morrison. He's discreet and efficient. We'll find their mother." Jenkins bowed respectfully, though Claire could still see the worry in his eyes. "As you wish, ma'am. Just be careful." After Jenkins left, Claire picked up the phone. Minutes later, she was in a confidential call with David Morrison. "I need you to check all the hospitals and psychiatric clinics in the region," she instructed. "Look for a woman named Pauline Bennett. Missing for about 3 months, 2 daughters." "Understood, Ms. Thompson. Anything else that might help?" Morrison asked. Claire hesitated, her eyes drifting to the Hope Valley file. "Yes. Also look into anything connected to an old clinic called Hope Valley. It was shut down a few years back, but I have a hunch." Ending the call, Claire felt a weight on her chest. The deeper she dug, the more she sensed she was about to unearth something bigger than she'd imagined. The rest of the day blurred with household tasks and tender moments with the girls. Claire found herself smiling more often than she could remember in recent years. There was something about their presence that filled a void she hadn't known existed. That night, after tucking Anne into bed, Claire found Sophie in the library, poring over a psychology book. "That's heavy reading for someone your age," Claire commented softly. Sophie looked up, a wisdom beyond her years shining in her eyes. "I want to understand what happened to Mommy, why she got so sad sometimes." Claire sat beside the girl, overwhelmed by a sudden urge to hug her. "Sophie, you know it's not your responsibility to understand or fix adult problems, right?" "But if I understand, maybe I can help when we find her," Sophie replied, her voice carrying a determination that broke Claire's heart. In that moment, gazing at a child who bore the world's weight on her small shoulders, Claire was struck by a devastating realization. She recognized that look. She'd seen it years ago, in a boardroom. The same determined gaze, the same passion for helping others, the same drive to comprehend the complexities of the human mind. Sophie was the living image of the young psychologist who had fought tooth and nail to keep Hope Valley open. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together in a way Claire wasn't prepared to face. The connection between her and these girls went far beyond a chance encounter on a rainy night. It was an unbreakable tie forged years ago in corporate decisions and ethical conflicts that Claire had conveniently shoved to the back of her memory. "Sophie," Claire began, her voice trembling, "your mom, did she ever mention where she worked before you started moving around so much?" The girl furrowed her brow in thought. "She talked about a pretty place, lots of trees, said she helped people find hope again." Claire felt her heart race. Hope Valley. There was no more doubt. That night, long after Sophie had gone to bed, Claire remained awake, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and memories. Past decisions that once seemed like mere strategic moves on a corporate chessboard now had faces and names. Fate, Claire realized, had a cruel sense of irony. It had brought to her doorstep the daughters of the woman whose life she had inadvertently turned upside down. And now, that same fate placed her in a position to help, or cause even more harm. As the night wore on, Claire sat there, her mind full of unanswered questions and a heart heavy with responsibility. The mystery of Pauline Bennett and Hope Valley was only beginning to unfold, and whether she wanted it or not, she was now irreversibly woven into a story that promised to change not just her life, but everyone around her. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, breaking the silence that hung over Claire's study. It was David Morrison, the private investigator she had hired. "Ms. Thompson, I have some preliminary information." Morrison's voice sounded serious on the other end of the line. "A woman matching your description was seen at several hospitals in the region over the past few months. However, there are no recent records of admission or treatment." Claire's heart quickened. "What about her name, Pauline Bennett?" There was an uncomfortable pause. "Well, that's where things get complicated. I found court cases tied to someone with that name, but the files are extremely jumbled. Some appear to be sealed, others have simply vanished." Claire frowned, a knot forming in her stomach. "What kind of cases?" "Mostly labor disputes, from what I can tell. But there are mentions of custody battles and even a possible involuntary commitment. Ms. Thompson, if I may say so, we might be dealing with a very complex story here." After ending the call, Claire sat in silence, her mind a storm of thoughts. Labor disputes, custody. What exactly had happened to Pauline Bennett? Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock on the door. Sophie stood in the doorway, her dark eyes filled with a seriousness that made Claire's heart ache. "Is everything okay?" Claire asked, forcing a smile. Sophie hesitated for a moment before entering. I heard you on the phone. You were talking about Mommy." Claire felt a sting of guilt. "Sophie, I promised I'd help find her. Remember, I'm just looking into a few things." The girl nodded slowly, sitting in the chair across from Claire. "Mommy always said sometimes people don't understand when someone tries to do the right thing." "What do you mean?" Sophie fiddled with the hem of her shirt, avoiding Claire's gaze. "She worked at a place where she helped people, but then something bad happened. She said it was unfair, that powerful people didn't really care about those who needed help." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. Sophie's words echoed distant memories of tense meetings, employees protesting corporate decisions. Could it be? "Sophie," Claire began carefully, "do you remember the name of that place where your mom worked?" The girl furrowed her brow, concentrating. "Something with hope. Mommy always talked about hope. Hope Valley." The puzzle pieces kept slotting together in ways Claire wasn't ready to handle. The link between her and these girls went far beyond a fateful stormy night. It was a tie forged years ago in corporate decisions and ethical conflicts Claire had buried. Later, while preparing dinner, Claire couldn't stop thinking about the day's revelations. Why did the girls never mention their mother's full name? Was it out of shame or fear? Her train of thought was interrupted by a sharp cry from the living room. Claire rushed in to find Anne curled up on the sofa, her face flushed and hot. "My tummy hurts," the little one whimpered, clinging to Theodore. Claire felt panic and an unfamiliar protectiveness collide in her chest. Without a second thought, she scooped Anne into her arms and called for Sophie. "We're going to the doctor," she announced, already grabbing the car keys. In the pediatric emergency room, Claire found herself answering questions she had no answers for. Exact age, medical history, allergies. Each, "I don't know," felt like a stab to her heart. "It seems to be just a viral fever," the doctor finally diagnosed. "Probably caused by stress and the change in routine. She'll be fine with a few days' rest and plenty of fluids." Driving back home, Anne asleep in the back seat and Sophie quietly vigilant beside her, Claire questioned all her priorities. How could she, a successful executive, feel so unprepared, so maternal? Night fell on the Thompson manor, bringing with it a silence laden with unanswered questions and newly found responsibilities. Claire put Anne to bed, tucking the blankets around the small figure. "Is she going to be okay?" Sophie asked from the doorway, her voice trembling slightly. Claire nodded, pulling the older girl into an impromptu hug. "Yes, we'll take care of her." In that moment, with Sophie in her arms and Anne sleeping peacefully, Claire felt something shift inside her. These girls, and who were strangers just days ago, now felt like part of her in ways she couldn't explain. The phone rang, shattering the moment. It was Morrison again. "Ms. Thompson, we have a solid lead," he said, urgency in his voice. "A woman matching Pauline Bennett's description was admitted to a psychiatric hospital 3 days ago. It's about 120 miles from here." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure?" "Almost certain. But there's something odd. The name on the record. It's not Pauline Bennett." "What name is it?" A pause on the line. "Claire, the name registered is Hope Vale." The world seemed to spin around Claire. Hope Vale, Hope Valley. Was it an alias, a cry for help, or something deeper, more entwined with a past Claire feared to face? As she hung up, Claire looked at Sophie, who watched her with wide, curious eyes. The mystery was only beginning to unravel, and Claire knew that what came next could change everything. For the girls, for Pauline, and inevitably, for herself. Claire's decision was swift and instinctive. Within minutes, she was packing clothes for the girls while Martha prepared snacks for the trip. "Sophie, Anne, we're taking a trip," Claire announced, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think we've found a clue about your mum." Sophie's eyes widened, reflecting both hope and fear. "Really? Where?" "A hospital, not too far from here," Claire replied, choosing her words carefully. "But I need you to be prepared. It might not be exactly what we hope for, okay?" Anne hugged Theodore tighter. "But we are going to see Mommy, right?" Claire felt her heart clench. "We'll do our best, honey." The Mercedes sped through the night, passing road lights that blurred by the windows. In the back seat, Sophie held Anne's hand. Both were unusually quiet. "Girls," Claire broke the silence, glancing in the rearview mirror, "can you tell me a bit more about your mum? What was she like before all this?" Sophie exchanged a look with Anne before answering. "Mommy was always strong. Even when things got hard, she never stopped smiling at us. She told us stories every night," Anne added, her voice small and dreamy. "Stories about a magical place where everyone was happy and no one got sick." Claire felt a pang in her chest. "And when things got hard, what happened?" Sophie hesitated. "Mommy lost her job. She got really sad. Said bad people had taken her dream. But she still protected us. We had to move a lot," Anne continued. "But Mommy always said it was an adventure, that one day we'd find our own Hope Valley." Claire tightened her grip on the steering wheel, an increasing discomfort coiling in her stomach. Why did these words affect her so deeply? Why did she feel on the brink of a revelation that might change everything? After hours of driving, the hospital finally appeared in the distance, its pale lights contrasting with the dark sky of early morning. Claire parked, feeling the weight of anticipation surrounding them. At the reception, a middle-aged nurse greeted them with a tired look. "May I help you?" "Yes," Claire answered, her voice trembling more than she wanted. "We're looking for a patient. The name registered is Hope Vale." The nurse typed something into the computer, her expression becoming serious. "Yes, we do have a patient by that name, admitted a few days ago. Are you relatives?" Sophie stepped forward. "We're her daughters. Please, can we see her?" The nurse looked at the girls, then at Claire, clearly assessing the situation. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but the patient is in a delicate state right now. She's under sedation and can't have visitors." "But," Anne began to protest, tears forming in her eyes. Claire knelt, staying at the girl's eye level. "Listen, I know it's hard, but we have to be patient. Your mom needs rest to get better, okay? Let's find somewhere to stay nearby and we'll come back as soon as possible." Sophie nodded, displaying a maturity beyond her years as she comforted Anne. While Claire arranged details with the nurse, promising to return in the morning, she couldn't help but notice a photo on the wall behind the desk. It was an old picture of the hospital, taken when it expanded years ago. Cutting the ceremonial ribbon was Claire herself, younger, representing Thompson Enterprises. A shiver crawled up her spine. How many invisible connections were intertwining her past with these children's present? At a nearby hotel, Claire settled the girls into one room, promising to stay next door. When she was finally alone, she collapsed onto the bed, her mind swirling with questions and emotions. She picked up her phone, fingers hovering over the keypad. Should she call Morrison, ask for more details on Pauline Bennett, on Hope Valley? Something stopped her, a growing sense that she stood at the brink of a discovery capable of changing everything. And perhaps for the first time in her life, Claire Thompson was afraid of what she might find. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Sophie, standing on the threshold, her eyes shining in the dim light. "I can't sleep," the girl said softly. "I keep thinking about Mommy, alone in that hospital room." Claire felt her heart melt. She opened her arms, and Sophie ran into them, a small sob escaping her lips. "It'll be okay," Claire murmured, more to herself than to Sophie. "We'll figure out the truth, I promise." As she cradled the girl, Claire couldn't help but recall all the decisions that had brought her here. Every choice, every corporate move, each professional triumph. It all seemed to converge on this moment. Tomorrow, Claire thought, tomorrow we will finally meet Hope Vale, or Pauline Bennett, or whoever this woman is who ties together every piece of this puzzle. What Claire didn't know, as night wore on and sleep finally claimed her, was that the truth awaiting her in the morning would be more shocking and transformative than she could ever imagine. Past and present were about to collide, and nothing would be the same afterward. The sun had barely risen when Claire's phone buzzed. It was Morrison, the detective. "Miss Thompson, I found something. I'm sending the documents now." Claire opened the email with trembling hands. As she read, she felt her world collapse around her. The full name leaped from the screen: Pauline Bennett Winters. A violent flashback seized her. Pauline Bennett Winters, her former partner, the woman she had maneuvered out of the company years ago. Claire staggered to the hotel window, staring at the hospital across the street, though her mind was years in the past. "Claire, you can't do this!" Pauline yelled, her eyes red with tears and anger. "Hope Valley is more than a business. It's a haven for people who need help." "It's a financial sinkhole, Pauline," Claire responded icily. "Thompson Enterprises can't keep funding a failing project." "Failing?" Pauline scoffed bitterly. "What about the lives we've saved? Doesn't that matter to you?" Claire averted her gaze. "The shareholders." "The shareholders?" Pauline interrupted. "What about your conscience, Claire? Or did you sell that along with your soul?" Returning to the present, Claire's reflection in the window showed a pale, shaken woman. How could she have been so blind, so cruel? The puzzle pieces fell into place painfully. The injustice at work Sophie mentioned, their precarious situation, all directly tied to Claire's actions. Her stomach churned. She had destroyed Pauline's life. And now, through some cruel twist of fate, Pauline's daughters had ended up in her care. Claire sank into an armchair, her body trembling. How could she face Sophie and Anne now? How could she look into Pauline's eyes, knowing what she had done? For a moment, she considered running, packing her things and vanishing, leaving the girls in the hospital's care. It would be easier, less painful. But then, like a movie, the memories of the last few days played through her mind. Anne's shy smile, Sophie's fierce determination, the burnt pancakes, the bedtime stories. No, she couldn't abandon them. Not now. Claire stood, a firm resolve settling over her. She had to fix this. She had to face Pauline, confess everything, and somehow try to repair the damage she'd caused. With unsteady steps, she went to the girls' room. Sophie was already awake, sitting on the bed with a book in her lap. "Good morning," Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Ready to go to the hospital?" Sophie nodded, her eyes shining with equal parts hope and worry. "Do you think we can see Mommy today?" Claire swallowed hard. "We'll do our best, sweetheart." While helping Anne get dressed, Claire felt the weight of every passing second. Every innocent smile from the girls was like a knife in her heart. How would they react when they learned the truth? On the drive to the hospital, Claire mentally rehearsed 1,000 ways to explain. None of them felt right. How do you tell a child you're the reason her mother suffered? At the hospital reception, the same nurse from the previous night greeted them. "The patient is conscious now," she said, "but still fragile. Only short visits." Claire's heart raced. This was it. No more running. "Girls," she knelt to address Sophie and Anne, "I need you to be really brave now, okay? I'm going in first to talk to your mum. There are some things we have to clear up." Sophie frowned, clearly sensing something was off. "Why, what's going on?" Claire took a deep breath. "It's complicated, honey. I promise I'll explain everything later. For now, trust me one last time." With one final look at the girls, Claire followed the nurse down the corridor. Each step felt like an eternity. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Finally, they reached the door. The nurse knocked softly before opening it. "Miss Vale, you have a visitor." Claire stepped in, her eyes immediately locking onto Pauline's. Recognition was instantaneous. The years had been harsh on Pauline, but those eyes that once blazed with passion and resolve, now stared at her with a mixture of shock and something else. Anger. Fear. "Claire!" Pauline's voice was just a whisper. What are you doing here?" Claire took a step closer, feeling the weight of years of guilt and regret. "Pauline, there's so much I need to tell you, so much I need to explain." Pauline tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "Explain? After all these years, after everything you did?" "I know," Claire replied, tears forming in her eyes. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but your daughters—" "My daughters?" Panic flared in Pauline's voice. "What do you know about my daughters?" At that moment, as if summoned, Sophie and Anne's voices rang out from the corridor. Mommy, we're here." Pauline's gaze swung to the door, then back to Claire, a painful understanding dawning in her eyes. Claire felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. This was the moment to face the consequences of her actions, to try to repair what she had broken years ago. "Pauline," she began, her voice trembling, "there's something you need to know." The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor signaled that Sophie and Anne were almost there. Time was running out. Claire knew the next words out of her mouth would change everything, forever. Room 317 was steeped in tense silence as Claire entered, followed closely by Sophie and Anne. The antiseptic hospital smell seemed stronger there, mingling with the faint scent of wilting flowers on a windowsill. Pauline lay reclined in the bed, her pale face stark against the white sheets. Her eyes, once vibrant, now looked tired, but still held a flicker of determination. "Mommy!" Anne's shout shattered the silence like a bolt of lightning. and within seconds, both girls were at the bedside, their small hands clutching Pauline's. "My girls," Pauline whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're here. You're safe." Claire stood near the door, her heart pounding. She watched the scene with a mix of relief and growing apprehension. Then Pauline's eyes moved from her daughters to Claire. For a moment, confusion flickered in them. Then, as if a switch had flipped, recognition dawned. "Claire." Pauline's voice held a blend of disbelief and something darker. "Claire Thompson." Sophie and Anne turned, looking from their mother to Claire, clearly confused by the sudden shift in Pauline's tone. Claire stepped forward hesitantly. "Hello, Pauline. What are you doing here?" Pauline cut her off, her voice trembling with contained anger. "After everything, after all you did." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Anne clutched Pauline's hand tighter, while Sophie glanced between the two women, worry and confusion on her young face. "Mommy," Sophie began softly. "Ms. Claire helped us. She found us and took care of us." Pauline looked at her older daughter, then back at Claire, her eyes narrowing. "Is that true?" Claire swallowed, feeling the weight of years of guilt and regret. "Pauline, there's so much I need to explain. I had no idea, not until recently, that they were your daughters." "You didn't know?" Pauline laughed bitterly, wincing at the pain. "If you had, would it have made any difference?" The girls looked at each other, clearly confused. Anne tugged on Pauline's sleeve. "Mummy, why are you mad at Mrs. Claire? She's been so nice to us." Pauline closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, they were filled with a mix of rage, confusion, and grudging gratitude. "Claire," she said, her voice more controlled now, "why are you here? What do you want?" Claire took another step forward, her hands trembling. "I want to make things right, Pauline. I know what I did in the past. It was unforgivable. But when I found Sophie and Anne on that stormy night, I had no idea who they were. I just wanted to help." Pauline looked at her daughters, noticing their clean clothes, their well-fed faces. Clearly, they had been cared for, but years of hurt and distrust don't vanish easily. "You destroyed everything I worked for," Pauline said, her voice low and thick with emotion. "Hope Valley was more than just a business. It was a dream, a lifeline for people who really needed it." Claire felt tears brimming in her eyes. "I know. And there isn't a day I don't regret the decisions I made. Pauline, if I could go back—" "But you can't," Pauline interrupted. "What's done is done." Silence settled over the room once more, heavy and oppressive. Sophie, always the most perceptive, looked from her mother to Claire, the gears in her young mind turning as she tried to make sense of what was happening. "Mommy," she said finally, "is Ms. Claire the bad person who took your job away?" Pauline looked at her daughter, then at Claire, the pain in her eyes evident. "It's complicated, sweetheart." At that moment, a nurse entered the room. "I'm sorry, but Ms. Vale needs to rest now. All visitors must leave." Claire nodded, relieved for the interruption but dreading leaving things in such uncertainty. "Pauline," she said softly, "I know I have no right to ask this, but can we talk later? There's so much you need to hear, so much I need to say." Pauline stared at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she gave a slight nod. "All right, for the girls." As Sophie and Anne reluctantly said goodbye to their mother, promising to come back soon, Claire felt the weight of years of wrong decisions and missed opportunities. She knew the path forward would be hard, possibly painful, but she was determined to do whatever it took to fix what she had broken so long ago. Leaving the room, Sophie grabbed Claire's hand, her eyes brimming with unspoken questions. "Miss Claire, what's happening? Why was Mommy so mad at you?" Claire knelt, meeting the girl's gaze. "Sophie, there's a lot I need to explain to you both. I promise I'll tell you everything, okay? But right now, your mom needs rest, and we need to process a lot." Walking down the hospital corridor, Claire knew she was on the edge of a precipice. The next conversations, the next decisions, would shape not just her future, but Pauline's and the girls' too. The past and the present had collided dramatically in that hospital room, and the repercussions would be felt for a long time. Claire could only hope that somehow there would be a chance for redemption amid all this pain. The coffee at the hospital cafe was cold and flavorless, but Claire hardly noticed as she stirred it, lost in thought. Sophie and Anne sat across from her, their eyes full of unanswered questions. "Miss Claire," Sophie finally broke the silence, her voice quivering slightly. "Why was Mommy so angry with you? What happened?" Claire felt a knot form in her throat. How could she explain years of cold corporate decisions and their human cost to a child? "Sophie, Anne," she began, choosing her words carefully. "A long time ago, your mother and we had a very serious disagreement. I did something that hurt her deeply, something that affected her work and a lot of people's lives." Anne frowned, hugging Theodore tighter. "But you're nice. Why would you do something bad?" Tears pricked at Claire's eyes. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, sweetheart. Big mistakes. Back then, I didn't realize how much my actions were hurting others." Sophie, always perceptive, narrowed her eyes. "Is that why we had to move so often? Because of what you did?" The blow of realization struck Claire with full force. She nodded slowly, at a loss for words. At that moment, Pauline's doctor approached, his expression grave. "Ms. Thompson, may I speak with you in private?" Claire stood, giving the girls a reassuring glance before following the doctor. "Ms. Vale's condition is delicate," he explained in a low voice. "She needs specialized and expensive treatment, as well as a long recovery period. Without that, the chances of relapse are high." Claire nodded, her mind already tallying costs and logistics. "I'll pay for everything, whatever she needs." The doctor looked relieved, but hesitant. "That's very generous, but the patient seems reluctant to accept your help." Claire closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the years of anger between her and Pauline. "I understand. Could I speak to her?" Back in room 317, Claire found Pauline sitting up, looking more alert but still frail. The girls rushed to her side as Claire lingered by the door. "Pauline," Claire began gently, "the doctor explained your situation. I want to help. Please, let me pay for your treatment." Pauline looked at her daughters, then at Claire, her face a storm of conflicted emotions. "Why, Claire? Out of guilt. To ease your conscience." "Mommy," Sophie interjected, her voice trembling, "please accept the help. We just want to be together again." Anne, not fully grasping the tension, released Pauline and ran to Claire, hugging her legs. "Miss, Claire took good care of us. Mommy, she makes pancakes almost as good as yours." Pauline watched the scene, her heart torn between reluctant gratitude and years of pain. "Claire, you don't understand. It's not just about money or treatment. It's about trust. You destroyed that a long time ago." Claire felt the words like a punch to the gut. "I know, Pauline, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But please, think of the girls. They need you healthy." Pauline closed her eyes briefly, haunted by painful memories. "You can't do this, Claire," Pauline shouted, tears streaming down her face. "Hope Valley is their only chance." A younger, colder Claire stood impassive. "The numbers don't lie, Pauline. It's an unsustainable project. The board has already decided." "What about the lives we're saving? Doesn't that matter to you?" "Business is business," Claire responded icily. "You should have thought about that before staking everything on an unrealistic dream." Pauline opened her eyes, coming back to the present. Claire was there, older, her eyes pleading for a chance at redemption, and her daughters, so innocent in the midst of this adult drama, looking back and forth with hope and confusion. "I can't raise my girls properly without help," Pauline finally admitted, her voice low. "But Claire, you have to understand. The pain you caused, it doesn't just vanish." Claire nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. Not just the treatment, but everything." Sophie, always the peacemaker, grasped her mother's hand. "Mommy, Ms. Claire helped us when we needed it. Maybe..." Maybe we can give her a chance." Pauline looked at her older daughter, seeing in her a wisdom beyond her years. Then her gaze fell on Anne, still hugging Claire's legs, smiling innocently. With a deep sigh, Pauline finally spoke. "All right, Claire, let's try, for the girl's sake. But don't think it'll be easy. We have a lot to discuss, a lot to work through." Claire felt immense relief flood her. "Thank you, Pauline. I promise I'll do everything I can to make this right." The girls quietly celebrated, exchanging hopeful looks. But both Claire and Pauline knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. As the nurse entered to check Pauline's vitals, Claire reflected on how one stormy night and a chance encounter had triggered a chain of events that now promised to change so many lives. Forgiveness, she realized, was a slow and painful process. But there, in that hospital room, with Sophie and Anne as silent witnesses, a small seed of hope began to sprout. The path to redemption would be long, but Claire was determined to walk it, step by step, day by day, until she could finally look Pauline in the eye and see not only forgiveness, but perhaps one day, understanding. The following days at the hospital were a whirlwind of activity. Determined to do everything possible, Claire hired the best specialists in the region to care for Pauline. Room 317 soon took on a more welcoming feel, with fresh flowers, books, and even a small radio playing soft music. Sophie and Anne spent every possible moment by their mother's side, their faces glowing with the joy of finally being reunited. Claire watched from a distance, her heart tightening with a mixture of relief and guilt. One particularly calm afternoon, while the girls were out with Martha to buy snacks, Pauline finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Claire," she began, her voice calm but laden with emotion, "I think we need to talk about everything." Claire felt her stomach churn but nodded. It was time to face the past head-on. "Do you remember that day?" Pauline asked, her eyes distant. "The day you told me the board had decided to shut Hope Valley." Claire closed her eyes, the memory flooding back. "I remember. Every second. You destroyed more than just a project that day, Claire. You destroyed dreams, lives, people who depended on that place." The words hit Claire like physical blows. "I know, Pauline, and there isn't a day I don't regret it." Pauline turned to face her, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Did you know that after I lost everything in the legal battle, I couldn't find work for months? No one wanted to hire the crazy woman who fought Thompson Enterprises." Claire felt her heart split. I didn't know." "Pauline, I was so blinded by ambition, by the numbers." "Numbers," Pauline repeated bitterly. "While you were counting profits, I was counting coins to buy food for my daughters." Silence fell heavy once more, weighted by years of pain and regret. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice trembling. "There are no excuses for what I did, Pauline. I acted unforgivably, driven by greed and ambition. If I could turn back time—" "But you can't," Pauline interrupted. Then, after a pause, she continued with a sigh. "Yet, you saved my daughters. You took care of them when I couldn't. And for that, I'm grateful." Claire felt a faint spark of hope in her chest. "Pauline, I know I can't erase the past, but I'm willing to do everything possible to repair the damage I caused." Pauline studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "The doctor says I'll be discharged in a few days, but I'll still need rest and care for quite some time. You and the girls can stay at the manor," Claire offered quickly. "There's plenty of space, and I'll make sure you have everything you need." Pauline hesitated, a clear struggle on her face. "Living under the same roof as you, Claire, I don't know if I can do that." At that moment, Sophie and Anne returned, their faces lighting up at the sight of their mother and Claire talking. "Mommy," Anne cried, rushing to the bed. "Miss Claire said we can all stay together at her big house. Please say yes." Sophie, more reserved but equally hopeful, added, "It would be good for your recovery, Mom, and we could all be together." Pauline looked at her daughters, then at Claire, conflict evident in her eyes. "Girls, it's complicated. Miss, Claire and I have history." "Pauline, Claire interjected softly. I promise to give you and the girls total privacy and freedom. The manor is big enough for all of us. This would only be temporary, until you're fully recovered and can decide what to do next. After what felt like an eternity, Pauline finally nodded. All right, but only until I'm better and under certain conditions. Claire felt immense relief. Of course, anything you need. The girls celebrated quietly, hugging Pauline and then running to hug Claire, who was momentarily startled by the gesture. While the children chattered excitedly about their new temporary home, Pauline and Claire exchanged a loaded glance. There was a long road ahead, full of difficult conversations and tense moments. But there, in that hospital room, a tiny spark of possibility had been lit. In the weeks that followed, as they prepared for Pauline's discharge and the move to the manor, Claire found herself reflecting constantly on fate's twists, how a stormy night and a random meeting had triggered a chain of events that now promised to change so many lives. Forgiveness, she understood, was a slow, painful process. It wouldn't be achieved overnight, maybe not even in months or years. But there, watching Sophie help her mother pack a small suitcase, and Anne chattering happily about rooms in the manor, Claire felt renewed determination. She would do everything within her power to correct her past mistakes. Not only for Pauline or the girls, but for herself, to become the person she wanted to be, the person she might always have been meant to be. When they finally left the hospital, the sun shone brightly, as if greeting a fresh start. Claire helped Pauline into the car, noticing how she still hesitated slightly at her touch. Are you ready? Claire asked softly. Pauline looked at her daughters, excited in the back seat, then at Claire. No, she answered honestly, but we'll try. With that, they drove off toward the Thompson Manor, leaving behind a hospital that had seen so many revelations and emotions. The future was uncertain, full of obstacles and potential conflicts, but it also brimmed with possibilities. As the car continued down the road, Claire couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was her chance at redemption. An opportunity to turn years of pain and regret into something new, something better. The journey would be long and difficult, but watching the girls smile in the rearview mirror, Claire knew it would be worth every step. The morning sun bathed the Thompson Manor as the car pulled up to the entrance. Claire opened the door for Pauline, who hesitated before stepping out, leaning on a cane. Sophie and Anne jumped from the back seat, their eyes shining with excitement. Welcome, Claire said softly, a nervous smile on her face. The first few days were a blend of discomfort and adaptation. Pauline, still fragile, spent most of her time in her room, emerging only for meals. Claire did her best to give the family space, yet remained close in case they needed anything. The girls, oblivious to the tension between the adults, explored the manor with boundless curiosity. Their laughter echoed down the halls, bringing life to a place that had long been steeped in silence. One quiet afternoon, about 2 weeks after their arrival, Pauline finally approached Claire in the study. We need to talk, Pauline said, her voice firm but not hostile. Claire nodded, indicating a chair. Of course, please sit. Pauline sat, her eyes scanning the opulent room. All this, she began, was built on the backs of many lives, Claire, including mine and my daughter's. Claire felt the weight of those words. I know, Pauline, and not a day goes by that I don't regret my actions. Regret isn't enough, Pauline replied, though her tone carried more weariness than anger. What happened can't just be erased. Claire inhaled deeply. You're right. That's why I want to propose something. I'm willing to return part of the assets that should have been yours, or if you prefer, we can form a new partnership. This time, fair and equal. Pauline raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. You'd do that? Yes, Claire answered without hesitation. It's the least I can do to start fixing the harm I caused. A heavy silence filled the room. Pauline closed her eyes as if weighing every word in her mind. You know, Claire, she finally said, for years I carried so much anger, so much resentment. There were days I just wanted you to suffer the way I did. Claire lowered her head, bearing the brunt of her guilt. But now, Pauline continued, seeing you caring for my daughters, offering all this, I realize you really are remorseful. Claire lifted her gaze, meeting Pauline's eyes. More than you can imagine. Just then, the sound of children's laughter spilled into the room. Sophie and Anne ran down the corridor, chasing a ball. Pauline gave a slight smile. Look at them, happy, safe. Something I couldn't give them for so long. Pauline, Claire began, her voice trembling, I know what I did is unforgivable, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Pauline regarded her for a long moment. Forgiveness, Claire, isn't something you give all at once. It's a process, a long, hard road. I understand, Claire nodded, and I'm willing to walk that road, no matter how long it takes. In the days that followed, a new routine took shape in the manor. Claire and Pauline, still guarded, began working on plans to revive Hope Valley together. Sophie and Anne, sensing the shift, seemed to flourish. Their laughter sounded more often, and the tension that once weighed on their small shoulders began to lift. One sunny afternoon, about 3 months after the move, Claire gathered everyone in the living room. Hands shaking, she presented Pauline with a folder of documents. What's this? Pauline asked, curiosity piqued. These papers give you back your stake in the company, Claire explained. And more than that, it's a contract for a new partnership, 50-50 Downs, to rebuild Hope Valley. Pauline flipped through the pages, her eyes widening at each one. Claire, this is... It's the right thing to do, Claire finished. It always was. Tears welled in Pauline's eyes as she stood. For a moment, the two women stared at each other, years of pain and regret passing between them. Then, abruptly, Pauline pulled Claire into an embrace. Sophie and Anne, who had been watching with wide eyes, ran to join the hug. For several minutes, the four of them stood there, entwined, as if sealing a new pact. When they finally pulled apart, all of them with tearful eyes, Pauline spoke softly. This doesn't erase the past, Claire, but it's a start, a new beginning for all of us. Claire nodded, a genuine smile lighting her face. It's all I ask. A chance to do things right this time. In the months that followed, the Thompson Manor underwent a transformation. What had once been a cold, lonely place now overflowed with life and hope. Pauline, now fully recovered, immersed herself in revising plans for the new Hope Valley. Claire, for her part, leveraged her contacts and resources to ensure the project received all the support it needed. Sophie and Anne thrived. Enrolled